So I love video games. Whether it's the visuals, the soundtracks, the gameplay, video games have so much to offer in terms of sheer entertainment value. Now, one could argue that most of the enjoyment found in games would be in the gameplay. I mean, it has game right there in the word, and what is the point of a game if not to be played? In my perspective, the average game's story evolved hand in hand with its gameplay. Game stories were allowed to become more complex as technology allowed for the games themselves to be more complex as well. You can just look at games made by people like Hideo Kojima, for instance. Death Stranding isn't the same without PS5 controller gimmicks. Metal Gear Revengeance isn't the same without Xbox's expert sword technology. And the original Metal Gear Solid isn't the same without Psycho Mantis being able to read your PlayStation's browser history. But now we've come to this point in gaming where these two things are no longer as bonded as they once were. On the contrary, the narrative actually found a far more enticing partner, graphical fidelity. And while those two went off into the sunset, gameplay kinda stagnated. Now don't get me wrong, you can still find really fun and inventive games out there with beautiful presentation, but it definitely feels like things have shifted to be more cinematic experiences than having really genre-defining gameplay, especially on the AAA side of the industry. I feel like I don't really have to describe to you what a movie game is in this day and age. But for the uninitiated, what I define as a movie game is a game that is more focused on being a spectacle or experience, substituting interactivity for immersion. These are games that are not really that complicated mechanics-wise, and interacting with these mechanics in a complex manner is not often asked of the player. They are not just games with long cutscenes. Metal Gear is not a movie game. Until Dawn is a movie game. Kingdom Hearts is not a movie game. Detroit Become Human is a movie game. We all get it? Great. But what if I told you of one movie game that potentially has one of the greatest stories ever told by mankind? A game wrapped in gritty business practices and strange presentation that would ultimately cause it to fall into obscurity. But somehow, as the industry has changed, it may have retroactively become one of the most ahead of its time games of all time. And a game that if it were re-released now with an improved package, I guarantee it would be one of the most well-received remasters in this generation of consoles. I'm DJ Maximum, and today, we're talking about Asura's Wrath. Asura's Wrath is an action game developed by CyberConnect 2 and published by Capcom. Released worldwide back in February 2012, an action game with the name CyberConnect 2 and Capcom on it was enough to smack Game of the Year on the back when it was first pitched. Capcom, a company who basically only makes go-to games, especially in the action genre, with games like Devil May Cry, The Resident Evils, and even Beautiful Joe. And CyberConnect 2, masters at making some of the most beautiful anime games on the market, with Storm Connection having some of the most insane supers I've ever seen. Putting all of this together could only lead to something incredible. Is what I would say if we were talking about the companies right now. You see, back in 2012, these companies weren't exactly of the same prestige they are currently. CyberConnect actually didn't seem that bad from the research I did. Funny enough, they were still mostly making Naruto games, as well as this series called Dot Hack. I have no idea what that is, but if I should check it out, let me know. So the real standout is Capcom, who was having a bit of a rough time around the early 2010s. This was during the time where Capcom threw Mega Man in a dungeon somewhere and refused to let him out. They also released Street Fighter X Tekken around this time, which was a very polarizing release. It also shared a symptom that Capcom games were having at that time, which was on-disc DLC. Basically, they would put content onto the disc, then just lock it behind a paywall, which, as you could believe, would only have a very negative impact on the game's reception. With all that background being said, I think it's time that we get into the game itself proper. I think we should start with the story, since that's the biggest thing that's going to take up a lot of our time here. And if I could describe it in one word, it'd basically be robot humans versus demons gang war? Well, it's kind of more complicated than that because you have, but then there's, let's just start from the beginning. So, this game takes place on Gaia in the great nation of Shinkoku. All things considered, life in Shinkoku seems pretty good. At the very least, it seems as though the people live in a pretty advanced society. However, there's just one little issue. Gaia has a bit of a monster problem. These monsters come in the form of Goma, these demon versions of wild animals. Monkeys, rhinos, fish, elephants, turtles, you name it. It's kind of interesting that they're really just wild animals, but I don't know, they kind of fit. So, in order to fight back against this Goma threat, the people of Gaia do what we all would have done, which is create 8 cyborg super soldiers who then lead an army of Buddha robots and an entire space fleet. Trust me, it only gets better from here. All these things are empowered by this energy called mantra. Mantra is life energy that civilization has learned to cultivate by praying. They use this mantra in order to make their armies even stronger. Later we'll learn that Mantra is a lot more powerful and a whole lot more complicated than we would realize, but we'll get into that later. As I mentioned before, this grand army is spearheaded by 8 individuals named the 8 Guardian Generals. The 8 Guardian Generals are individuals who have been found with a particular affinity for Mantra, this being showcased by their personalities being heavily defined by a singular emotion. So who exactly are these Guardian Generals? Well, there's Wizen for violence, Asura for wrath, Yasha for melancholy, Deus for pride, Olga for lust, Kalro for sloth, August for greed, and Sergei for vanity. So I just want to take this time to say, the character designs in this game are fucking awesome. All the markings and metal parts for each of these guys make them so unique and just so cool. The game opens up on what in any normal game would be the climax. We take control of Asura, the General of Wrath, as he and other generals lead the army in a giant space battle against the Goma. Oh yeah, I forgot. The Goma and our heroes can breathe in space. That's how it is, it's just better to accept it. It's revealed that this battle is a plan to dry out Vlitra, which is like the mother beast of all the Goma. How does one draw out such a creature, you may ask? Well, that's easy. Use the Brahmastra, a very large weapon that shoots a giant laser that when fired at the earth releases Vlitra from within, who breaks out of half the entire globe. This is all within the first 10 minutes of the game. So now that Vlitra is freed, it's time to finish the fight, which Asura does single-handedly with some good old-fashioned whoop-ass, which is gonna be the first installment into what I'm gonna call the Asura is cracked moment of the video. As you progress, we'll be keeping track of the insane power creep that occurs throughout, specifically with our main character Asura. This first one he's able to do pretty easily because of Mantra enhancement. Yeah, if you thought these guys weren't strong enough on their own, they can get even stronger by having Mantra pumped into them like me off the Flintstone vitamins. This is done by Mithra, Asura's daughter, who is assigned to be priestess of Shinkoku because of her gift in cultivating Mantra. And with that, the day is saved. Asura and his daughter return home to his wife and celebrate the army's victory. Oh, and look at that! Looks like Asura's been called into the Emperor's court to be rewarded for his efforts. That's nice. Let's just walk to his throne room and see what's going on. Well, that's not good. The Emperor has been murdered, and Asura, being in the very worst place at the very worst time, is framed as the culprit. To make matters worse, Mithra has gone missing, and Asura's wife has met the very same fate as the Emperor. Enraged, Asura jumps into space looking for answers. Though insane with how casual he does it, this will not take the spot on the Asura's cracked podium, where he finds the other gathered Guardians and a captured Mithra. It's revealed that this is all a part of the Guardians' plot to gain power over the Empire for future endeavors that they will also need Mithra for. Deus is actually pretty open about the group's entire plan when confronted by Asura, but we learned that's because the final prep for this preparation stage is Asura's disposal, which they carry out by striking with lightning and casting him back down to Earth where he dies on impact. Yes, Asura dies. But this isn't the end for our hero. Asura awakens to find himself hanging from a tower in purgatory with no recollection of his former life. Here he makes the acquaintance of a golden spider who tries to jog his memory and urges him to climb before he falls into hell. He does as it says, feeling urges from within kicking up. He starts picking up speed until he breaks through into the mortal realm, proving he truly is too angry to die. As Asura looks at his surroundings, he realizes things seem very different than they were before. Well, this is because although it didn't seem like climbing that tower took very long, it actually took him 12,000 years to do so. Asura needs to get some trips from Kratos. That guy got the Hell Express pass, only takes him like an hour. After spending some time wandering the wilderness, Asura stumbles across a village. As he approaches, it seems as though the villagers have some idea of who he is and are afraid of him. Gee, I wonder why. Surely that would be explained in game. A cool detail that this game does is that it has all the mortals speak an entirely different language, one that's never translated in game. It's a really cool way of showing the huge time skip as well as the separation between God and mortal. Well, whatever Deus' plan is must not be in full swing yet, because right as Asura enters this village, it is immediately under attack by the Goma. Asura jumps into action, protecting the villagers from the attacking wave. In the middle of the fight, a Shinkoku fleet arrives and attacks both Asura and the remaining Goma. Inside the command ship, we see Wizen, who looks to have gotten some new drip since the last time we saw him. I guess that's what 12,000 years will do to you. When Wizen sees Asura, he commands the army to commence cleansing at once. What is cleansing supposed to mean, you may ask, my dear viewer?
My resolution? Airstrikes. Bomb them.
After it ends, Wizen comes down to clean up the pieces. Enraged by their actions, Asura confronts Wizen about attacking innocents. This is when it is revealed that the Shinkoku Empire has begun killing people as they pray in order to manufacture an enormous storage of that mantra energy that I mentioned before. The two begin their epic battle, where, to be honest, Asura beats Wizen's ass as if no time has passed at all. However, Wizen has some new tricks up his sleeve.
For 12,000 years.
Wow, with how huge those sleeves are, there must be a lot of tricks. So now Asura faces off against a mountain-sized Wizen, and does not go nearly as well as the fight before. Crushed by the mountainous weight of Wizen's fat ass, Asura is helpless against the continuous flurry of blows that follow. However, in that moment, a flash of Mithra appears in Asura's mind, which is all Asura needed in order to remember his promise to save his daughter. With a newfound burst of energy, Asura lifts up and punches Wizen into space. However, the fight's not over. Using even more mantra, Wizen grows once more, now being even larger than the Earth. Wizen goes to wipe out Asura, as well as the entire continent, to be honest, finger poke Doom style. All seems lost, but then Asura grows some extra hands and simply catches the finger. He then does rapid fire punches into the finger, which causes it to lift up slightly. The force of these punches causes Asura's arms to explode. With only one arm remaining, he launches one final blow, which sends a giant shockwave throughout Wizen's entire finger. Suddenly, energy released not only into Wizen's hand, but also into his entire body, causing him to explode. Being able to kill Wizen in what was basically one punch is obviously insane, and will be our new Asura's cracked moment of the video. With that, Asura stands victorious in this battle. Before the battle-ravaged Asura can go somewhere to lick his wounds, Yasha appears on the battlefield. Yasha is our main rival character for this game. If I had a nickel for every rival with a cold demeanor who specializes in precise and deadly slashes with a royal blue aura who goes on their own arc about power in their character action games, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but strange to happen twice. Asura proceeds to fight Yasha with no arms, which goes about as well as you would think. Yasha finishes the job, Asura being executed yet again. Our hero once again finds himself hanging above Naraga. He once again meets the Golden Spider, who just...
If you can accept their actions, perhaps you should let go and allow your soul to become one with Gaia again. This is exactly why your soul will never belong to the Goma nor the 7 deities.
Kinda yaps, but during this yap session, Asura finally remembers who he is as well as what happened. Remembering all of this has him extra pissed, so he climbs back up once more where his vengeance can get started for real. Fast forward another 2,000 years and Asura is back in the moral realm, where it looks like the villagers he saved have converted his grave into a shrine, as well as taken settlement there. Here he befriends a young girl, one who oddly resembles Mithra, and a baby she seems to be taken care of. The trio begin to travel together after Asura saves them from a gang of Goma gorillas. They come across another village that is under attack. Asura, being the nice guy he is, takes care of the Goma. The villagers start to praise and pray to him like a god, but he rejects these notions.
Stop praying. This is pathetic.
However, this commotion once again calls over the attention of the Empire, who sends yet another fleet to that location. However, once they arrive, they actually completely ignore Asura, instead opting to kill the civilians. It seems as though the Empire is not done people farming. They basically have convinced these villages to turn into people farms where they accept being slaughtered in support of the kingdom, which is like really fucked up when you think about it. After mowing through another army of Empire goons, Asura decides to go straight to the source. But first, one of my favorite character moments happens here. Basically, after the fight, Asura sees that the girl he defended is beating one of the Buddha corpses with a rock. Asura walks up and stops her and promises that he alone will avenge these people.
You let me handle them.
It's really cool to see this guy who is the embodiment of rage not only see it as a tool, but also a harmful feeling, making the choice to calm her rage and make it his responsibility to invoke it in order to save this girl from a dark path. Being a father to someone who reminds him of his main goal, his daughter. I also really like it because the big rage mirror that you build up pops up on screen and goes down as this happens, which is such a cool touch and a fun way to integrate gameplay with the story being told. Asura rushes off, preparing to do battle with the incoming fleet headed to their location. This fleet is headed by Kalro, the sloth deity, the strategist of the group. What follows is basically a huge action set piece where Asura rampages through each warship one by one in search of Kaoru. Have you ever seen the Egg Fleet stage from Sonic Heroes? Yeah, it's basically that. Asura finds the main ship where Kaoru is hiding, but surprise, it was a trap laid with a holographic Kaoru with a real one in another ship. Kaoru orders all the ships to fire at the one Asura is in, completely obliterating it. But Asura just decides to not give a shit and flies out of the explosion. But this was also a trap. Being in midair, Asura has nowhere to run as an orbital cannon shoots him at point blank range. I repeat, an orbital cannon from point blank range. Which Asura proceeds to just kind of shrug off. This is now going to go to the top of our Asura's cracked moments. Wyzen may have been bigger, but at the end of the day, he was just a really big guy. This is a vaporizing laser that can be viewed breaking the horizon of Gaia from space. So yeah, I think it deserves the spot. Kaoru, deciding he wants to be anywhere else but here, ejects from the ship to safety. Except Asura is actually holding on to his escape pod, after a panicked yap session about how what they're doing is actually super cool.
Yes! The world will be free from the threat of the Goma, and we shall attain eternal paradise!
Kaoru gets popped like an old, fiery, wrinkly pimple. Asura falls in a flaming ball back to the ground, falling unconscious because of the impact. The person to find him first is August, the deity of greed and Asura's old master. August takes Asura over to a hot spring in order to recover from his recent battle. The two enjoy the spring, some drinks, and a nice view of the beautiful mountain range while remembering old times. Once the two are done reminiscing, it's time. Asura vs. August is the best boss fight in the entire game and maybe in my top boss fights in any video game of all time. The music, the setting, the moments. This is a boss that in any other game wouldn't even have the vibe of a final boss, but that of some like secret boss that you would come back to at the end of the game. So you would think that this fight takes place in the hot spring we're just in, or maybe the mountains off to the side. Nope, these two need way more space to really throw down. So they just decide to go to the moon. See, I told you this shit is peak. I highly recommend that you take the time to find this fight on YouTube, but to give you the cliff notes, the two fight. After some time, August pulls out his sword of Wailing Dark, which has been said to only have been unsheathed for one other opponent, that being Deus. The sword ends up cutting the moon in half as the two come to blows. I swear I'm not joking. The fight ends with August pulling out one last attack. He extends the blade of his katana into Asura. Asura barely catches it in time, but the blade keeps extending, carrying him off into space. Stay with me now. August proceeds to stab Asura through space all the way back down to Gaia. Asura hits the ground, but the sword continues until it breaks through on the other side of the world. Asura tanks the hit until August gets close. He then punches the sword to break off the blade, destroying his arms once more. He then uses the broken piece of sword in his mouth to cut down August once and for all. I feel like I need a cigarette. I think it goes without saying, but this entire fight is going up as the Asura's cracked moment of the video, and I highly doubt that it will be topped anytime soon. Now having killed 3 of the 7 deities, Asura is becoming a little bit of a problem for the group's efforts. Olga, yeah, remember her, decides to take things into her own hands. And by her own hands, I mean with another fleet. How many fleets do these guys have? The fleet carpet bombs the entire area, and although Asura himself makes it out fine, that's not the case for everyone else involved. The girl and the baby that Asura had been protecting all this time are caught in the crossfire, completely eradicated along with the rest of the village. Another village laid to waste. Another innocent girl taken from the world. Another wannabe god dictating someone else's fate. Is this really the paradise they've sacrificed so many for? Asura reaches his breaking point. So far we've seen Asura use the emotion of rage in order to do some very unreal stuff. But what exactly happens when that rage completely takes over? Well, that's when we get Berserker Asura, a form in which Asura becomes a pure being of wrath, where he is so angry, his soul literally dies, leaving his body on autopilot. Because of this, he attacks anything he sees. Luckily for him, the one thing in sight is Olga's personal fleet, who all have guns trained on him. Berserker Asura manifested these 4 giant hands, which he uses to shoot giant rage beams. Yes, he has those now, completely demolishing the attacking ships. Olga sees all of this go down and thinks to herself, yeah, we gotta nuke this guy. So she orders for the Brahmastra to be fired on Asura's location. Yeah, remember that thing? The laser that awoke in Vlitra at the start of the game, which caused like a whole section of the world to blow up? However, this does not sit well with Yasha, who's fully down with blowing up Asura, however doesn't agree with the amount of stocked up souls being used for it. After an unsuccessful argument, Yasha decides to take things into his own hands and disable the laser, making him a traitor to the Shikoku Empire. Yasha fights through the army in order to get to the cannon. Though he does get there, it's not completely in time, as the laser is still able to hit Asura for a moment before then being disabled by Yasha. When he goes down to check out the scene, he finds Sergei, the god of vanity. However, it also turns out the beam was only able to weaken Asura, keyword being weakened. Basically, he doesn't have the big hands or death lasers, but he's still this black undead gremlin. Asura attacks Sergei from behind and skewers him. With his dying breath, Sergei reveals that he was the one that did the dirty work and stole Mithra, as well as killing Asura's wife.
12,000 years ago, Owen was branded a traitor and hunted down. Who do you think took Mithra? Who do you think I took from? It was I killed your precious sister.
Yasha revealing that he knew the whole time. This twist didn't hit for me in the way I feel that it's supposed to, mostly because Sergei is one of the gods that gets put into the does nothing category. So he mostly just attribute all of his actions to the actions of the gods in general, and we're already not on good terms with them anyway, so it's not like anything really changes. But the part I love is what this moment tells us about Yasha. This whole time, all the gods have shown to be very full of themselves, and although they are working towards a common cause, they still all are enjoying being new gods. However, Yasha is only here for the goal, for the paradise, and he's given his life away for that goal. You see, Yasha isn't just a co-worker, he's Asura's brother-in-law. The stealing of Mithra and killing of Asura's wife, Yasha's sister, impacts him in a way that only one other person could relate, that being Asura. But he still did it for the mission. He's not a bad guy per se, just a driven one, no matter the cost. Oh right, Asura's still a demon. Asura rips Sergei in half and focuses his attention on Yasha. Yasha tries to calm him down to no avail and realizes that the only way is to put him down. The two battle, with Asura having the upper hand due to his enraged form. However, the tides turn as Yasha seems to tap into his inner emotional mantra of melancholy, similar to what Asura has been doing with Wrath. Accepting the pain of his betrayal and sacrifices gives Yasha the edge he needs in order to defeat Asura. Leaving him to self-res, Yasha leaves Asura in order to attend to more business. One big rock climbing session later, Asura is back. Yasha returns, telling Asura that he is no longer a part of the 7 deities, meaning there is only one left to take down, Deus. Yasha calls down his super sick space motorcycle. Yes, he had that the whole time, and the two head to the Brahmastra. I just want to take a moment and talk about how cool it is that Asura just stands on the front of the motorcycle. It would have made so much sense if he was sitting or hanging from it, but nope, he just stands with his arms folded and never falls off. And that's why he's my goat. After fighting through even more fleets, the two finally make it inside the Brahmastra. The inside is pretty interesting. They find the inner structures, a separate dimension, the core infused with 7 trillion souls, mech security. What? What about the core? Oh, it's filled with 7 trillion souls. That's the number of people in this world 880 times over. So yeah, their big plan was to accumulate a metric shit ton of mantra, load it into the Brahmastra, and then shoot Vlitra, which will surely kill it this time. Asura reacts as we all would to this plan. The two finally make it to the top, where Deus, god of pride, waits for them on his throne. Both parties show that they are completely stuck in their paths, where the only way forward is through one another. The final battle begins here. Asura and Yasha fight Deus and his lightning nunchucks. Yes, he has those. The battle is a struggle, but it does end in Asura and Yasha being victorious. With Deus incapacitated, Mithra is finally freed. Hooray! Roll credits! Except, not really. A rumbling can be heard from Gaia. The large releases of mantra that spilled out during the battle has awakened Vlitra once more. With Deus' final breath, he laments that there is no way for them to win now that he is defeated, holding on to his pride till the very end. However, Asura and Yasha stand undeterred, ready to rush into battle. The two fight Vlitra and her forces in a way akin to the beginning of the game, but due to lack of reinforcements, the two are quickly overwhelmed. However, now free from her prison, Mithra uses her priestess abilities for some good old-fashioned mantra enhancement. but now using the entirety of the mantra that has been stored within the Brahmastra. This transforms Asura into Mantra Asura, his most powerful form yet, and also his coolest because he has arms like 1,000 arms, and he gets a back halo, and don't even get me started on the... Sorry. Asura's just so fucking cool, man. Oh yeah, Yashra gets powered up too, but not to the same extent. Father's privilege, I guess. The two use their newfound power to fight not only through the hordes of Goma, but also through Vlitra herself. Yeah, so basically they figure out that to take out Vlitra, they have to get to her core, which is basically in the center of Gaia itself. To do this, they fly into its mouth and use a combined attack in order to pierce through its mouth directly into the heart. Here they find the Vlitra core, a separate entity who is the personified form of Gaia's rage, which leads to one of my favorite lines.
Terrible fury. Strange, isn't it? It looks like you when it's angry.
But is it as strong?
Now I'm not gonna lie, this fight kinda sucks ass in my opinion, but we'll get back to that when we talk about the gameplay. A 1-2 combo later and the core is defeated, destroying Vlitra and the Goma for good. Asura and Yasha return to the Brahmastra. There stands Mithra. After almost 100,000 years, Asura is finally reunited with his daughter. After going through hell, all that stands between the two are a few quick strides.
So you made it back, both of you.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me! Yeah, Olga's still alive. I'm gonna be so honest, I'm pretty sure the creators just kind of forgot about her, and when they were wrapping things up, they were like, oh shit, and then threw her in at the last second. Even more so because that's how the game ends. Or more specifically, if you just play through it normally. We'll get to that later. If you do some extra stuff, you'll unlock the true ending. The true ending follows the exact same build-up. You have to play through the whole level again. We'll talk about it. The changes pick up right after Mithra's capture. Pissed at Deus' death. Oh yeah, she really likes Deus, thus lust being her affinity, I guess. Olga goes to slit Mithra's throat, but she stopped by golden webs? That's right, the spider from Purgatory is here. I kid you not, he kills Olga in an instant. Instead of letting Mithra go free, he captures her in a giant cocoon. He fuses with her, revealing that he is Chakravartin, the one true god of this world, using Mithra as a vessel. He then begins to shine a brilliant light. Yasha rushes Asura away, sensing danger approaching. The golden spider fuses with the Brahmastra, becoming a giant avatar of Mantra. And this is where the game ends for real this time. Normally I'm fine with cliffhanger endings, you know, you gotta have a reason to make a sequel and all that. But in a game that is basically a 7-hour shot of adrenaline, this ending just feels like such an odd way to end things off. Especially since it's 2 cliffhangers back to back. Alright, I think I've spent enough time talking about the story. How long has this video been so far? Jesus Christ. Alright, let's start talking about the gameplay of Asura's Wrath. The gameplay of Asura's Wrath is an interesting topic because for an action game that thrives on being exciting, actually playing the game leaves a lot to be desired. Not that it's bad per se, because it isn't. It's a completely serviceable 3D beat 'em up. However, you can definitely tell that pressing buttons was on the afterburner during development. So the basic gameplay loop is that the player, as Asura, wipes out waves of enemies in the arena in order to clear that encounter. There's nothing on screen that tells you how many enemies are left, there's not even health bars for the enemies. Instead, there's the heat gauge. Located below your health bar, this is a gauge that slowly builds as you kill enemies. Once it's fully built up, Asura can burst, which is basically the player pressing the continue button. And that's about it. There are no other objectives that occur rather than building heat. All the player has to worry about is smacking around whatever enemies are in the ring, which is fine, but your mileage may vary when it comes to how long it takes before this starts feeling repetitive. Asura is a one-man army, and the game does its best to represent that. But when it comes to playing, it over time starts to feel like a pretty generic action game with regards to its melee combat. You got your standard lights, a launcher, finishers for downed enemies, and counters for attacking ones, which all look super cool. The area where the game tries to deviate is with its heavy attacks. Asura has an attack where he does the Crash Bandicoot spin. It hits hard and can cover a pretty large area. However, it's on a cooldown, so you can't use it all the time. This same cooldown is applied to Asura's finishers. This makes it so that the player has to decide whether to use their heavy option to do crowd control, or keep it in order to have a better way to confirm kills and build up their burst meter. This limitation can be circumvented by going into unlimited mode, a mode which will give you infinite heavies and finishers for a limited amount of time. You also have access to a shoot button where Asura will send out rapid fire blasts. This was the developers' answer on how to deal with the few flying enemies you'll fight in the game, but I don't really like it all that much for a couple of reasons. 1. The shots themselves feel really weak, not having much impact when hitting enemies, especially grounded ones. 2. There's no intuitive way to move while shooting. When you hold the button down while on the ground, Asura locks into place and begins to aim, which is good to be able to track mobile enemies. However, it leaves Asura as a sitting duck for any other attacks coming at him. When shooting mid-air, Asura will keep his forward momentum but will not aim, so you'll have moments where you do the jump shot and Asura completely whiffs and flies off. Though shooting isn't going to be your main focus when in the arena fights, they will be your main option when on the on-rails shooting segments. There are certain parts in Asura's Wrath where, for whatever reason, whether it be falling through space, running through caves, or flying on a motorcycle, the game will place the players in a shoot 'em up section. In these you'll have access to your regular shots as well as charged projectiles that lock onto opponents. The more opponents you lock onto before firing, the more damage the shots do. It's very akin to things like Star Fox or the tornado missions in Sonic Adventure. The last form of gameplay style we have is in the form of quick time events. You can really tell this game was made in the early 2010s by just the sheer amount of QTEs that are thrown around. Timing QTEs, matching QTEs, QTEs in cutscenes, QTEs in-game for the counters. Some of the QTEs don't even serve a purpose other than being a pulse check for the player during an extra lengthy cinematic. And how well you do on these is taken into account when the game's tallying your ranking at the end of a mission. So you have to be staring at the game at all times to make sure you don't fuck up that sync rating. Overall, the gameplay in this game isn't bad, far from it. It's just bare bones. Although Asura goes through many transformations in this game, none of these things change how he actually plays. As far as we the player are concerned, it's all cosmetic. On top of that, the arena fights are all you do. No exploring, no side missions, nothing else. Which is so odd because there are parts of the game where the game wants you to walk around or walk to another screen, so clearly more was planned. I don't think it had to be on the same level as things like Bayonetta or anything, but this game really feels like it's begging for some kind of skill tree or something that gives it the variety it desperately needs. You can tell that someone in the development team thought so because there are perks you can acquire by playing the game. You see my health bar right there? Well, fun fact that the game doesn't really tell you is that you can go and change this for different ones. Each one has a unique effect, things like taking less damage or your overheat bar, the cooldown for your heavies recharging at a much faster rate. These changes are small, but they're at least something that can change your playthrough on revisits. Because of this, sometimes the actual game sections feel like a slog to get through. Many of the sections feel like they can go on and on without much variety to make one section different from the last, except for the locations of the fight. There are only so many Goma turtles and Gatling gun Buddhas I can destroy before it all starts blending together. And this isn't helped by the fact that this game chugs its frame rate with all the stuff they'll put on screen at one time. It would be reasonable to just blame this on the way PlayStation Plus streams games nowadays and all that, but nope, this shit was going on when the game was new. But a lot of these issues show themselves more so when the game has you fighting hordes of enemies. Where the gameplay really excels is in its boss fights. In my opinion, the one-on-one fights in this game are so much fun, and I wish there was more put throughout the game. Since there's only one enemy on screen, you don't have to worry about pot shots coming in from off screen, and you don't have to worry about the game going to 13 frames per second. Also, since there's less moments with staggered enemies, the follow-up animations feel way fresher due to less volume. They also come with actual engaging mechanics, with some feeling like raid bosses you find in Warcraft or something. It also helps that since the bosses don't die in 2 hits, I was able to see how a lot of Asura's attacks flow really well into each other, even when going from ground to the air. Funny enough, this fight can kind of feel like playing a Ninja Storm game sometimes, which makes sense given the developers. Except when it comes to the Bleacher Core, the worst boss fight in the game. The Bleacher Core does a great job exposing some of the ugly bits of gameplay even in a one-on-one. The main problem is that the arena is just way too big, man. The core has a move where it dashes across to the opposite side of the arena. The problem is that there's no sprint option in this game, and Asura isn't exactly the fastest guy around. By the time you roll or jump your way over, the AI can easily just decide it's time to dash again, and then the game continues. So then to speed things up, you decide to focus on building unlimited gauge so you can access your big moves. But since you can't punch all the way across the globe, you now have to use the weird shooting, which just leaves you open for when Blitzer dashes again. This loop just makes the fight take forever. Not to mention, if you happen to get chipped to death, you have to do the whole fight over again. It's clear that these strengths were noticed by the team, because all new content will focus more on singular combat. After a few months of being released, Asura's Wrath will receive its share of DLC. Some of the DLC was already baked into the disc, as mentioned before, but I'll still be counting them as regular DLC. The two standouts are both of the Lost episodes, which were two completely optional boss fights. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to guess who you fight in these chapters. Well, if you guess Ryu and Akuma from Street Fighter 4, I don't believe you. Yeah, in one of the most random inclusions ever, Asura gets to fight Ryu or Akuma who are just teleported into his world. I guess it's not super random given that both games are tied into Capcom, but these fights are sick as hell with set pieces that really help set them apart from the base game. Ryu's mission starts with you being locked into 2D and fighting him as if you're in Street Fighter 4, including supers and ultras. Akuma has a cool section where you do a QTE as Asura fights back against the raging demon. I have no proof, but I don't think these are random decisions. I don't know. After playing these games, you can't help but feel that Asura was supposed to be a bigger deal in Capcom's sphere of games, especially with this DLC. If not with getting new games, at least with inclusion in others, which would have been super cool. But I guess we can only dream. So yeah, the Lost episodes are really cool pieces of DLC, but there are more releases to talk about. A majority of DLC offered for Asura's Wrath actually served to be more pieces of the story that were likely cut out from the base game because of time constraints. Some missions have you playing as Yasha, a concept that was explored in the base game, but now you get a lot more time with him as you play through him leaving the Guardians, but a lot of this DLC is story beats that you don't get to play through. One thing I failed to mention is that pieces of story are actually told through visual novel sections in between the huge cinematics that you've seen thus far. The DLC contains a lot of new visual novel sections. A cool thing they do is that each section is usually illustrated by completely different artists with their own unique stylings, which is really cool, but I didn't pay for this to read. But they do help you get more context about this world, and you do get an amazing animation of Berserker Asura that shows what exactly was going on when we saw that nuke explosion earlier on. And that's going to be all for today. You know, coming back... Wait, there's another DLC option? Oh, god damn it! Yeah, there was another DLC added for the end of the game, containing the game's absolute true final complete ending. I guess the people over at Capcom saw that it was unlikely for this game to get a full-on sequel, so they decided to have CyberConnect do some ending stuff so it at least has an actual ending. It starts exactly where we left off, with Yasha looking up at Chakravartin. Chakravartin also shows that he has complete control over the making of Goma, showing the efforts of the Guardians were ultimately futile as he could just spawn in more. Yasha realizes only one of them can defeat the Dark God, so he takes the Mantra Reactor, which houses the energy of all the souls they've collected, rips what's practically his soul out of his chest and adds it to the reactor, and then places it all within Asura. Once our hero wakes up, Yasha challenges Asura to a fight to reveal who should be the one to save the world. Asura wins, though with Yasha's state, the winner was already long decided. Yasha dies, leaving Asura to handle Chakravartin with his new energy source and all the mantra in the world. After some time recouping, remembering the promise he made, Asura is ready for the final battle. Asura makes a spaceship fly without being in it so he can ore farm some more and head straight for Chakravartin. However, God ain't playing any games and shoots a laser down. Now, we've seen Asura deal with lasers before, but this ain't a Brahmastra laser. No, Chakravartin pulls out a planet vaporizing beam, like it was clearly going to wipe out the entirety of Gaia. Luckily for it, Asura taps into one last transformation, Asura the Destructor. Obviously, blocking a planet vaporizing beam is going to be the next installment of the Asura's cracked moments. I love this form because it feels like we're really getting into childhood action figure territory. Like, yeah, I got this Asura figure, he's powered by trillions of souls, and he's bigger than the Earth, and he can tank orbital lasers, and he's all silver because that's cool as hell. Powered by the world and his former allies / former enemies, Asura sets off into space. As he flies, he has to shoot through planets and galaxies that Chakravartin throws in order to get close. Once he does, he punches him so hard that the two are sent to the event horizon. You know, the point in a black hole in which light can't escape, usually used to symbolize the beginning and end of known existence. Here Chakravartin gives an offer. Asura can choose to join him, become his avatar, and rule over a reset universe that Chakravartin plans to create after wiping out this one. He gets his daughter back, they get to go home, it's a win-win. All Asura has to do is give it to his influence, which he obviously doesn't do. The two fight through heaven and hell, which I gotta say, it's pretty funny seeing this heavenly figure get pissed and just start throwing hands. But things take a turn when Chakravartin shows he has a transformation of his own, Chakravartin, the Creator. As he touches the ground, he turns everything into a white void, showing that he's done pulling punches. Clearly Asura is outmatched, but Asura is never one to give up and continues to charge as the true god. His tenacity gives him the strength to fight back, actually putting Chakravartin on the back foot. This section is really cool because it's another part that has the narrative influence the gameplay. Chakravartin actually starts getting his own QTEs, which he begins to fail as the ass beating continues. At one point, Asura beats Chakra's ass so badly he coughs up Mithra, who actually stops Asura from continuing to attack. She warns that if he dies, so will the existence of Mantra, and if Mantra stops existing, then Asura would die as well as he is solely fueled by it. But this warning falls upon deaf ears, as Asura goes forward and delivers the final blow. And for our final installment of the Asura's Crack series, I gotta give it to being a god to death with your bare hands. In base form, mind you. Chakravartin dies, taking Mantra with him. Finally, having time to themselves, Asura and Mithra embrace. With his lifelong mission of keeping Mithra safe finally being fulfilled, Asura's wrath is finally satisfied in his final moments. He leaves Mithra and Gaia in a new age of peace, where they can decide how to live for themselves. And that is the end of the game, for real this time. You know, coming back to it, Asura's Wrath is such a good game with some big flaws that muddle the experience. The tech issues, the pacing, and underbaked ideas are problems, but still just such a blast to experience, if only just to see the insane shit that this character gets into during the campaign. Which is why I think this game should get a remake, or just a remaster, that could easily fix up these low points while boosting the already amazing moments. Like, imagine the August fight in 4K. Absolutely generational. This angry guy deserves another shot to be a big name in Capcom. But for now, let this video be a tribute to one of the best, if not the best fathers in fiction, the fallen god, Asura.